Hello, everyone. My name is Qiushi Wu. I'm a second-year PhD student from the University of Minnesota. And today I want to show our project, which is trying to identify the patches for security bugs precisely. And I finished this project with Yang, Stephen, and my advisor, Kangjie. And the first question is why do we need to identify security bugs? Because maintainers for large projects suffers from overwhelming numbers of bug reports every day. For example, maintainers for Mozilla are received more than 300 of bugs per day. And second, patch propagation in derivative program is hard and expensive. For example, many projects are derived from the Linux kernel. So if there is a security bug in the Linux kernel, even it has been fixed, it will take a long time for other derived program to fix this vulnerability. So because maintainers receive overwhelming number of bug reports every day, so security bugs may not be fixed timely, and attackers have opportunities to exploit these security bugs. So maintainers are prioritizing to fix security bugs. And unrecognized vulnerability or security bugs may be left unpatched in the program and also the derived programs. So our goal in this project is to identify the patches that are for security bugs. Okay. So the following question is how can we identify the patches for security bug? And the traditional approaches are usually based on two main methods. The first one is text mining method, and the second one is. But both of these methods have some limitations, such as they may have bad precision, or they cannot know the security impact of bugs precisely. For example, here is a vulnerability in the Linux kernel, which information bypass. Oh, sorry. And here is a comment of these patches for this vulnerability. And only from the comment, we can now know, okay, this patch is for security bug or non-security bug. But this patch doesn't mention any security-related keywords. So we prefer to use a program analysis based method to understand the semantic of bugs and patches precisely. And we at first defined that a bug is a security bug if it causes security impact when triggered. So correspondingly, a patch is for security bug when it blocks a security impact. So the question of how to identify patches to security bugs can be changed to how to identify a patch that blocks security impact. And we further define that a security impact is equal to a security rule violation. Security rules are coding guidelines for programmers used to prevent some security bugs. So the security rules violations will cause security impact. And we have also summarized the common security rules in the paper, and here I list several of them. And the first one is inbound access, which means that the read or write operation should be within the boundary of the buffer. And the second is no use after free, and also the use after initialization. And also permission check should be performed before some sensitive operations. So based on these security rules, we also summarize the violation for these security rules. And when violating these security rules, it will cause some corresponding security impacts, just like out-of-bound access, uninitialized use after free, or permission bypass. So we can define that a patch blocks security impact if we can prove the following two conditions. The first is that the unpatched version of code violates a specific security rule. And second, the patched version of code would not violate this security rule. By combining these two together, we can know that the patch has blocked this security rule violation, so the patch can block this corresponding security impact. So the challenge of this project is how to precisely determine the security rules violation. And our intuition is used to unique properties of under-constrained symbolic execution to determine if the code violates some security rules or not. The first property is that the security rules violation can be modeled as constraints. For example, here is a buffer access, and the buffer access against the index, and the constraint for out-of-bound access can be modeled as the index larger than the upper bound or the index smaller than the lower bound. And the second property that we want to use is a conservativeness, which means that if the constraint for under-constrained symbolic execution is solvable, this can be a false positive. Because the constraint is because here is under-constrained symbolic execution, so we don't collect all the constraints. But on the other hand, if we cannot find any solution against the constraint side, they indeed unsolvable. So benefiting from these two properties of under-constrained symbolic execution, we can first model the patch-related operation as symbolic constraints. Second, we want to show that the patched version will not violate the security rule, which means that we want to prove the violation of security rules is unsolvable. Then we want to show that the unpatched version will violating a specific security rule, which means that non-violation of security rules for the unpatched version is unsolvable. And our approach is to use the symbolic rule comparison, which is to manually artificially construct opposite constraint set for the patched version and unpatched version. For the patched version, because we want to prove that violation is unsolvable, so we will construct constraint for violating the security rules. For the unpatched version, because we want to prove that non-violation is unsolvable, so we will construct constraint for non-violating the security rules. By checking the unsolvability of this constraint set, we can confirm that a patch is for security bug if both constraint side for patched version and unpatched version are unsolvable. And the rationale behind this approach is that for a specific security rule, if the patched version never violates this security rule, this means that the patched version is in a safe state against this security rule. But in the situation that opposite to the condition of the patch, in this situation, the unpatched version must violate this specific security rule, which means that the unpatched version is in an unsafe state. So we can know that the patch has changed the program from the unsafe state to the safe state, which means that the patch can block the security rules violation, and the patch can block security impact. So this patch is for a security bug. And here, I want to use a concrete example to show the workflow of our system. And here is the out-of-bound access vulnerability in the Linux kernel. And our program will first analyze the patched version of code. It will first identify the security operation. And here is a boundary check against the STID, which is a critical, and extract a critical variable, which is STID here, and it will be using as a buffer operation. So we will set the operation for the buffer operation is a vulnerable operation. Then we will collecting the constraints for these slices. And here we will also insert the artificial constraint, which is STID larger than or equal to the boundary of the buffer, which means that the violating of security rules. Because this is the patched version, we want to prove that the violation of security rules is unsolvable. By solving this constraint, we can find that these constraints are unsolvable, which means that the patched version would not violate this security rule. And our system will next analyze the unpatched version of the program. It will extract the vulnerable operation and extract the critical variable and do the slicing. It also collecting the constraint in the slice, but the security operation is missed here. So if the security operation is missed here, we will insert the constraint that opposite to the patches, which is the STID larger than or equal to this macro, which is from the patches. At the same time, the artificial constraint will be introduced. The artificial constraint here is for non-violating security rules. Because for the unpatched version, we want to prove that non-violation of security rules is unsolvable. By solving this constraint, we can find that these constraint sets are unsolvable, which means that the violation of security rules, the non-violation of security rules is unsolvable. So the unpatched version must violate this specific security rule. In the last step, we'll do a symbolic rule comparison. We have already known that for the patched version, violating this security rule is unsolvable, which means that the patched version does not have an out-of-bound access problem. And also the unpatched version, for the unpatched version, non-violating security rules is unsolvable, which means that the unpatched version has this out-of-bound access security impact. So we can make the conclusion that the patch blocks an out-of-bound access security impact. And the advantages of this approach mainly three aspects. The first one is a very low false positive rate. And the second one is we can determine the security impact precisely. Third, this approach is easy to be extended, because to cover more kinds of security impacts, we just need to model more type of security rules symbolically. And our implementation is based on LLVM, and we have already implemented a prototype of seed, and now currently it can detect five types of common security impacts: out-of-bound access, permission bypass, uninitialized use, use offer free, and double free. And in the evaluation part, we first evaluate the performance of our system. We evaluate the 54,000 of patches in the Linux kernel on a desktop machine and find that for analyzing one patch is average less than 1 second. And we also analyze the false positive and false negative of our system. We have already showed that our system have a lower false positive rate, but correspondingly it have a pretty higher false negative rate. But most of these false negatives can be further reduced, because we manually check this false negative and find that most of these false negatives are caused by incomplete coverage for security operations or vulnerable operations. We also evaluate the security of this identified security bugs, because we have defined that a bug is a security bug when it has security impact, when it causes security impact when triggered. And the security impacts have already confirmed in this project, so we further analyze the reachability by checking the call chain from the entry point to the vulnerable functions. And we find that more than 150 functions security bugs can reachable from attacker-controllable entry points. These entry points include such as the system calls or error control handlers. Also, we find that these security bugs will continually influencing the other programs which derive from the Linux kernel, such as the Android kernel. We find that 21 of security bugs have been patched in the Linux kernel, but it's still unpatched in the Android kernel. Conclusion, we exploit the properties of under-constrained small execution for determining the security rules violation. And in this project, we have identified many overlooked security bugs in the Linux kernel, which shows that patch propagation is hard and expensive, and the maintainers should prioritize to fix security bugs. Yeah, that's all my presentation today. Thank you.
Well, we have time for plenty of questions, so.
Hi, Gantan from Penn State. So I wonder, are you assuming these patches are local, or can you deal with some patches that make global changes to the code, say here and there, and maybe change the global variables, that kind of things?
We haven't assumed these patches are local or not local, but from the results, most of the security patches are locally. Yeah.
Right. So if there's a patch that changes lots of code in the program, then you might have a problem.
I think that doesn't matter. Even if a patch has changed lots of program, but if one of the changed code is it can fix the security impact, we will identify this patch fix the security bug.
But you may need all of the changes to fix the bug.
Yeah.
Right. Then your symbolic execution may not be scalable to that.
No, because we analyze the patched code and unpatched code for the patched version code and unpatched version code. So if the fixes has fixed at least one security impact, we will say, okay, this fixed a security bug. But if we will not consider other fixes in the patch. One patch may fix multiple problems or may fix multiple areas in the program, but we will.
Yeah, I understand. But maybe for one particular vulnerability, you need to change multiple places in the program. That's what I was referring to. Changing one place may not be enough. Maybe you can take this offline. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this very nice presentation.
Thank you.
I had two questions. I was just curious about how often did you encounter solver timeouts when trying to solve constraints, and is it why you have a high false negative rates?
Oh, you mean about the path explosion problem? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have set a concrete timeline for, I think it's 10 minutes for one patch. If the symbolic execution is over 10 minutes, we will execute.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And thanks. And second question was, do you have a sense of what scope is actually okay, let me rephrase this. Where it works best, for the positive results, what was the scope of the paths you try to execute? Do you have a sense of if there's any noticeable path limit or scope or size of what scales well with that approach?
Sorry, I don't know where I understand.
Okay, maybe sorry, but that was a bit of a confused question.
Do you mean about the what kind of?
Basically, at which scope does it really scale? If you have events that are very far apart in your bug templates, it is more likely that your symbolic execution engine will reach state explosion.
Oh, yeah. Do you mean that if the fixes are, for example, for if there is a buffer overflow problem, you mean the fixes point is very far from the vulnerable point, right?
Yes.
I think this is pretty unusual for most of the security bugs. Yeah, it's pretty unusual. I think we don't find too many this kind of.
Okay, that makes sense.
And we have some evaluation for the patch size and also for the distance between the fixes and the vulnerable operations in the evaluation part in the paper.
I see.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So hello. What about you say the security patch has 3 components. Is there any security patch that only has 1 component?
Okay. Oh, yeah. This is a very good question, and the reviewers have also asked me this question. And we have to do the evaluation for the vulnerabilities in the Linux kernel in the 2019. We evaluate the more than 100 vulnerabilities and find that more than 88% of the patches for vulnerabilities have at least 2 components. And and the more detailed evaluation you can find in the paper.
Okay, so next question is there any partially fixed patch? So if you have a partially fixed patch, then the constraint is not a true or false. It's maybe something in between.
I think we now cannot identify the partially fixed patch. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Manuel Egel again from Boston University. Nice work. So I was wondering, you were talking to us about false positives and false negatives, and you had this example where there was no indication in the patch commit message about whether something is security related or not. How did you come up with ground truth?
You mean the false negative evaluation?
Yes.
For the false negative evaluation, we select the recent vulnerabilities in the Linux kernel, and we extract their patches and analyze their patches. And for the false positive evaluation, we manually check the security bugs that are identified by our system. We manually confirm this.
So you would still be missing stuff that is not tagged as security, because you wouldn't know about it, your system wouldn't flag it. So your false negatives are potentially much higher than the 53% that you have.
Oh yeah, this is a good question, but we haven't evaluated those parts because it's hard to select the ground truth.
Hence the question.
Yeah.
Okay, let's thank the speaker again.